Welcome, everybody, to Do More Better. We are on our 5th episode now. Got a little bit of momentum.
Big number 5.
Don't cancel your OnlyFans page just yet there, big guy.
Everybody knows lucky number 5.
Lucky. Yeah. Today's episode is about depression, and you and I have been talking about it. You said, I want to make an episode about this. We've got a few takes that, again, are probably pretty different than what most people talk about, and conventional wisdom that, you know, depression is a word that everybody knows and everybody talks about pretty regularly, but the actual real clinical psychological stuff, I think a lot of people don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I don't know where we're going to go with this.
I think you start, like, you know, you were telling me about how you start with a kid in the office.
Yeah,
and talk about depression.
I might hold off on that because I think initially my first thought is going to, like right as you were saying, I was thinking, the worst thing we did was name it.
Just like anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, we skipped over that too fast in the
Yeah.
other one. You're right. Like calling it something, you know, probably pretty similar to what we said about anxiety, that everyone has depressive thoughts.
Yes.
Everyone has thoughts that are, well, most people would characterize as like self-defeating or harmful
Right.
to yourself.
And I think we're going to be careful not to like invalidate or downplay people who really experience depression, and because it for sure is a thing. It's just it seems, yes, kind of like anxiety. We medicalized it, and
You have it, right? Like
you have this
yeah.
thing, like, and not only like do you have it, I am it, which is even worse.
I think that comes with like personality development stuff. You know, you get a young kid who's anxious, and after years of being anxious, they start identifying as the person who's
Yeah.
anxious. I feel like the same thing happens with depression, where it's like, well, I'm the person with depression, and I think, you know, the Dalai Lama would say, like, there's not a whole lot of room here to be somebody else.
Right. Once you identify with that, it promotes inflexibility, and it's a part of who you are, and that makes it much harder to change. Humans, like, throughout history have been really good about naming things. And if we look at the things we really like to do, I mean, just read horoscopes. You know, we love coming up with names and coming up with ways to understand things. Well, I'm a Virgo or I'm a Pisces, and that's why I act like that. And I think depression was just one of those new ones. And I often go back to the Greeks on this, because the Greeks were really good about, when they didn't understand something, they made up a god, and that god helped them understand it. So there's this lightning thing happening, and we don't get why it happens. We don't really understand how that works, you know. So it must be Zeus, you know. Okay, we're good with that. What about the ocean? Like the ocean, we don't really get that either. You know, like there's these storms, we don't understand them. They just kind of randomly come. Poseidon, okay, cool. And like now we look at that and we know that just stopped the process of understanding it, because they made up a god, and now they don't have to go and keep looking into it, and the god explains it. And then eventually we start understanding those ideas, and we can kind of get rid of Poseidon. We understand weather patterns. We understand how electricity works. We don't really need Zeus anymore. I think depression is just the new one. Like, it's the new god.
I'd probably actually argue with you that.
Okay.
I think it's a little more intellectual than you're giving it, but you know, I think I think understanding the god Poseidon and the way that that the sea can be chaotic, the way a god can kind of, you know, float about their whims. Like, I actually kind of think there was a little bit more intellectual behind that than what you're giving it, but
I don't know, man. I think so.
just called it.
So, let's say you're a first year graduate student, and I say to you, we've got a patient come in. They're not sleeping very well. They're not eating very much. They don't exercise. They report that they're sad all the time. What's wrong?
Or somebody's going to clinically
They're
call that
depressed.
depression.
Well,
Right.
that's Poseidon. And like, now we don't need to look any further. We don't need to figure out any of the variables. We don't need to understand the context of how it developed. They're depressed, and the first year graduate student's going to be done.
Yeah, probably a lot. I still think, I think that probably depends on the graduate student. I think somebody could take that and
Sorry.
no, you're not.
Maybe I shouldn't say first year graduate student, 10-year psychiatrist. You know, the
Again,
person's been working.
I would say a 10-year psychiatrist can probably be prone to just as much of the follies that a first-year graduate student can have. But I think if I told you I'm working with a kid who has depression, I think you would come at it like, oh, that god Poseidon, let's break that down. What's going on? Like, I don't think you would stop there.
No, I think that's why we're doing this episode.
Right. So, I mean, I think this happens all the time though. Like, I agree with you, but I also disagree with you in the same time. And that is that I think a lot of these old ideas, we kind of attribute it to like stupidity and ignorance. And I think like, no. Like, these people were extremely wisdomous. It's just that, you know,
that's fair.
They didn't have they didn't have to go on what we had to
That's
go
fair.
on.
And yeah, they didn't have the science. And that, like, I shouldn't say that the Greeks were stupid for that, you know, or that
Probably at the time, really good strategy to call it the science.
It's not a bad idea at the time, yeah. And even it's not a bad idea to, well, we can't figure out what's going on with some of these people, so they're depressed. And so now we need to start addressing it. Like, I think there have been some good things that come out of starting to label it. There's more mental health awareness. People are talking more about this. And so I'm not saying it's all been bad.
Right.
I'm just saying it sometimes stops the process of understanding really what happened and what do you do about it. And it promotes the inflexibility of now I am and I identify with this thing of being depressed. And it becomes more like a crutch than anything, and becomes more like something you have rather than something you experience, which is what I would lean more towards.
Because we talk about it all the time, I know where you want to go with this. So I would say maybe the startup to where we end up taking it is there's a lot of different theories of it. You know, there's a behavioral theory, which is you're not getting access to the reinforcement that you want.
So,
There's a psychodynamic, you know, everybody knows Freud. Everybody knows that. There's a psychodynamic. The superego is overly suppressive.
You're going to have to explain that one. I don't think.
I think there's like two. I'm not a psychodynamic trained practitioner, but from what I understand, when the phases of development are not achieved and you don't move past a phase, the superego develops a hypersensitivity and it oppresses a lot of things about the id and the ego, and so the superego is like basically in like a hyperactive state, like it's regulating way too much.
Right. And as you said that, maybe I just need to give old theorists more credit. The Greeks were brilliant, and Freud
was brilliant,
a genius. And I often dog on Freud, but a genius, you know, for not having anything and being the first to try to come up with a theory on it. So
okay.
Okay.
Then there's others. There's a you know. There's a cognitive model
theory,
your
cognitive distortions, and
you have distortions. There's probably a neurology. You know, your neurotransmitters are different. You have a lack of serotonin, those kinds of things.
Carl Rogers would probably say it was something to do with relationships. You've never
like
really,
a humanistic
stance, client-centered stance. You know, you've never really had a relationship that where you were allowed to just be yourself and be your authentic self, and that's how you started developing symptoms. And
you and I use ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. We use that a lot. The ACT theory, I think, would be like you are very distant from your values. Like whatever it is that you take a deep sentiment towards, you're pretty far disconnected from those.
Yeah, disconnection from your values, and then you get fused with your own thoughts and emotions.
I'd say the most popular of all those would be the neurotransmitter serotonin. When somewhere in the like late 90s, early 2000s, people said you've got a lack of serotonin and you have a chemical imbalance, and that's what's going on.
I laughed. So. Sorry, and it's not true. I guess it is. It's just simple, and it just. Okay, so look. How about can I give my theory?
Maybe the one thing we say about that is that was really heavily influenced by drug companies.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. How about I give my theory?
Yeah, so that's what I want. I want to know your theory.
So my theory, and I honestly think I came up with this one time. I had knee surgery, and I've always been an athlete, you know, and I had knee surgery, and I was in a point where I couldn't move my leg for 2 months. And
let's give a little context to this. I'm one of your good friends here, and watching you go through that was very difficult.
Right.
You were in a real rough spot.
A really bad place. And it's just, you know, once you've identified with something being, like, so whether you've identified with something for a long time, whether being a father, being a husband, being a partner, being a mother, being a therapist, being strong, being
professional,
being athletic, and so I had a pretty gruesome knee injury and had to have my knee in a cast for I think it was like 2 months, where I couldn't even drive myself.
This is when you were getting very serious into powerlifting at that point.
And so, and I probably, could have said that I started experiencing depression at that point, and then I had this epiphany of like what it was, and it occurred to me, and so I started like asking people around me, like, what is the opposite of depression? Because I think there was this misunderstanding of what it was, and most people say
happiness.
And 99% of people, anybody I work with will answer happiness.
I just want my kid to be happy.
Parents will say that. Other psychologists will say it's happiness, and that's where I think the problem is. It's not the opposite of depression. And so a lot of times what I do with my clients is I walk through a little formula, where I'll write I have a marker board in my office, and I'll write on the board 1/2 is equal to X over 6 or something like that. And then I'll have them ask, what goes into the X there, and it's definitely not 1, it's 3, so, and most kids, can get that. Most adults can get it. Some adults can't.
Basic algebra. Hey.
So in making that equation, so then what I do is, I say, well, here's the deal. Is you said happiness is the opposite of depression. Happiness is not. It's actually the opposite of sadness. Happiness and sadness are both these transient emotional experiences. They come, they go, they change like the weather. And they're dependent on what...
Fleeting, momentary.
Yeah. And so like the best thing in your life happens, you might feel a moment of joy for, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It depends even how great it was. It could make it a day, but I doubt it's going to last a day. The worst thing in your life happens, you could feel sad, but it could stumble over in depression. So, but that is different. But so
I'd actually give it a little more credit than that. I think you could go a week or weeks.
Like, with just being sad.
Birth of a child, you got married.
Oh, for the happy. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. You could feel that joy, but you're not going to be able to hang on to it, and it'll come and go. And so I write.
Eventually, your spouse is pooping and next to you, and you're, in the real thick of marriage.
Right.
So,
and so I write happy over sad equals X over depression. And I put them beside each other like that. And then I say, here's the issue. Is most people think happiness is the opposite of depression. So when they feel depressed, they do things that make them happy. If that were true, heroin addicts would be the happiest people in the world. If that were true, Elvis Presley would have been fine in his life. Marilyn Monroe would have been fine in her life. And it doesn't seem to be true.
Elvis died on a toilet seat. So.
Even going back to it. Huh?
Yeah.
I love how you came around to that. It's just art.
Any time to reference someone dying on a toilet.
Pooping. That's perfect. Yeah.
There you go.
And then we have other people who shouldn't have been happy. You have Martin Luther King Jr., you have Jesus, you have Gandhi, you have this group of people that were poor, mostly hated, had a really tough life, but were actually
really rough circumstances, jailed, killed, martyred.
It went so far as to be assassinated, most of them, and they weren't depressed. They probably should have been. So then that gives us an idea of what X equals in that. So I think that the opposite of depression is purpose.
Yeah.
You find purpose in your life, and it inoculates you from depression. But happiness won't inoculate you from depression. Happiness and the attempts to try to be happy and feel good might actually make it worse.
Yeah. I pretty often walk kids through a scenario. If I think they can handle it, I would walk an adult through this, assuming they can handle it. But the idea of, okay, you have a parent that dies and the funeral's tomorrow. Are you going to go? And everybody pretty quickly, without even thinking about it, goes,
yes.
Well, yeah, of course I'm going to go. It's my parent. It's like, well, why? Because that's going to make you sad. Why would you go if it's going to make you sad? And it's because there's some sort of purpose in there that matters beyond your sadness, that you would not be, I like the word content so much better than I like the word happy. Yeah. You're going to be content with who you are going to the funeral, who you are at the funeral, who you are going through the grieving process, rather than being the person that, like you said, well, I guess I'll just go get a morphine shot and feel happy in this moment. That's not going to satisfy what it is that's going on with that death that occurred in your life.
It was good.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. And so, because that would fall into lots of purposes and values that people have, which is being accountable, being strong in a time when you feel weak.
Right.
being compassionate, for your loved ones. Yeah, I'm good with that.
I think really that's why personally I like the ACT theory so much better than, I was trained as a behavioralist. And so the lack of access to reinforcement was what we were instructed on. I like the ACT one just because in ACT, you're supposed to find out what really matters to you. Right. And I think people really struggle with that. And I think they don't know. And I would even say that's probably the hardest clinical conversation I have, is helping people figure out what they care about. And so if they're distant from it and they come in and say they're depressed, there's a really great, we talked earlier in an episode with anxiety, that your brain is a survival mechanism and that it keeps you safe. Depressed people, just like a lot of people with anxiety, are probably pretty correct. A depressed person tells me this is not getting any better, and they stayed in bed all day and didn't get up and didn't shower and didn't go to the gym or go to school or something like that. It's like, well, you're right. It probably didn't get any better. Yeah. And then thinking, well, if you just got up and showered, like maybe we go into a little bit of the basic recommendations that go into depression. But I always think about it like, yeah, you probably are not close to what you care about, and you may not even know what that is to dig yourself out of this.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. And if anybody out there watching Google's behavioral activation for depression, which I don't know why that's not heard of.
It's not at least a term that's not familiar.
It's not a term I don't think is very popular. If you Google behavioral activation for depression, you'll see it compared to antidepressant medication treatment, and it's just as effective. Yep. And behavioral activation just boils down to what Wes is talking about. It's just do some more stuff. Like, just do some things. Exercise, make your bed, get up, eat your meals. But I think what I agree with you on is, and I've actually seen some research on this, is if you can get in touch with why you're doing it, like what value that is, you're more likely to do it.
I hate the question, find your why. I think you know that.
I know you hate it, yeah. I knew when I said it.
Yeah, I know. It's a bad question with expectations that I think are pretty inaccurate. But basically, if you boiled it down, it's like finding your why might take me 6 clinical sessions with somebody. That may really take a long time, because I think you can say some things that people appreciate. Hey, helpful. Does that matter to you? Oh yeah, absolutely. Helpful matters. But it's like, is that really this major thing for you? Is it really,
Yeah, I'm going back to the masturbation episode now.
Right.
Like, is that the thing when you're on your deathbed and that you're going to say, I'm so glad I prestiged in Call of Duty?
Right, yeah.
Or it's like, I'm so glad that I spent so much time trying to be comfortable.
And I wouldn't deny those kids, like, prestiging in Call of Duty's not bad. It's just, I don't know if that's going to crack these, like, top things about you that really matter. Maybe let's give some basics on depression too. Like, the treatment's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in and says, well, I don't talk to my dad anymore and I'm not hanging out with my friends. The treatment is?
Talk to your dad and hang out with your friends.
Let's talk to your dad and go hang out with your friends.
I like to use a term called taking back your life.
Yeah.
And it's a term we used to teach the mindfulness courses. So, yeah. And we'd have a whole session on taking back your life. And most of the time when I meet with someone who's depressed, their life has been on hold for a while because their depression has taken over their life. And so the main thing we want to do is take back over your life. What were the things you used to do? What were the things that gave you a sense of meaning, that made your life purposeful, that made your life, made you love your life a little bit, or at least like it. You don't even have to love it, but at least like it a little bit. And it's usually I used to talk to my dad, I used to hang out with my friends. I used to exercise. I was in school. Okay. What was it about that? What were you studying? And so, I think it all boils, it's pretty simple, is taking back your life.
Yeah. I think the difficulty comes when there's no access to take back your life, which is, well, my father's dead and I just moved to Arizona where all my friends are left in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that would make sense. I think, I don't know if that's
where I think behavioral activation comes in.
Yeah. I'd say, I don't know if that's as common as, and what the complaint I hear is I just have no motivation.
Yeah.
That I would say is the number one complaint I hear. And, I can be honest here, which usually I would want to roll my eyes to that because nobody has motivation to do the things that are hard.
Right.
We all have motivation to do the things that are easy.
There's a reason why LeBron James has a coach as well.
Yeah, I guess. Can you explain that? What do you mean? Like,
Just meaning that, I mean, even high performers,
Yeah.
need someone behind them going, keep going, you can do it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We all need people to support us.
right. I get what you're saying. Right. And so there.
Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
no,
that
it's
didn't
just,
come across
it was just a little out of left field there. Standing out there in left field with a tennis racket.
But I mean, sitting back thinking, though, I think the mistake is people sit back and think like, oh, LeBron James is totally motivated to go like train and run. And it's like, nobody wants to go do that.
Right.
Nobody wants to go run a bunch, you know.
I generally think, you bring up LeBron James, anytime there's somebody who's really good at something, this misconception is that we think that they just are naturally good at that and they naturally came to it. No, they work their butt off at it. You know, the people who are really good at standing up in front of a group of people and giving a talk, they weren't just born that way.
He was naturally born 6'8".
That helps.
You know, that helps.
Help.
But to think that he's not working hard is crazy.
Right. And but I think the motivation thing is the thing that bothers me, because I've rarely seen an emotion come before a behavior. And so I rarely see somebody feel comfortable public speaking and then start public speaking. You know, I've rarely seen somebody get motivated to lose weight and then start losing weight. You know, it actually, what happens is it works the other way around, is action produces motivation. If you, like, you're nodding your head right now, and if you were doing that and just making yourself do that, then you would agree with me. If you were shaking your head right now, then you would start disagreeing with me. Sometimes and this is research based, is our actions will change our emotions. They'll change our thoughts. When we put our face in a smile, we tend to feel happier. When we put our face in a frown, we tend to feel sad.
By the way, that stuff changes serotonin.
It also changes that
which is a big
stuff,
deal with depression.
Maybe we should get back to that too, though. But I guess what I'm saying, maybe let me just put a bow on that, that you're not going to feel motivated to make your life better.
Right.
It's time to start, and the time to start is now, is to just do something, write a goal down and get it done.
And I think that's where I was trying to go with that idea that, you know, if your father's dead and your friends are no longer accessible to you, it really is amazing how with behavioral activation that if you get out of bed and you shower and you get some momentum in your day and you do this and you go to the gym, it really is amazing how that changes your experience and your depression and your serotonin levels.
Mm-hmm. Right. So let's talk. We should probably talk about SS. So the antidepressants, which is the main thing.
Actually,
what's that?
That's the next episode.
We're gonna.
The next episode is entirely about SSRIs.
SSRI. Okay, I didn't realize that. I thought we were gonna talk about that today. But I guess when it gets into that, serotonin and dopamine are probably pretty important to talk about when it comes to mood and how we feel. They're both slightly different. So serotonin is one of those neurotransmitters that our body produces when we've accomplished goals. So it's kind of external reinforcement. The dopamine is the thing that we do that when it feels good. You know, it just naturally feels good. And so when we get into the medication, the SSRIs are kind of working on the serotonin part. I think when we get into behavioral activation, we're talking about those.
SSRIs, probably tell everybody what that stands for.
Selective.
And how it's related to depression.
Yeah, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So you'll hear the names Prozac, Zoloft.
Most common treatment medically for depression.
Yeah, Lexapro, Effexor. There's a couple that are a little different, like Wellbutrin's a little different. Yeah. But for the most part, they're mostly SSRIs. And so I would say what the two of us think, you can have an antidepressant effect by accomplishing goals. Mm-hmm. You can produce more serotonin by setting a goal and accomplishing it. You can also produce more dopamine too.
I would say you can directly develop, the words are not going to come out right, but you can develop more purposeful thoughts by directly engaging in something that you know is going to make you sad.
Explain.
Yeah, the funeral example that I gave, you know, part of the issue here when we say sadness and happiness are the opposites, and that's not the opposite of depression. What's the opposite of depression is purposeful action. That and if you're looking at something saying like, oh, we got to get this person happy again. If you're part of a sports system or something, like, oh, let's just take them out and get them drunk. Let's take our friend out and like try to help them feel happy. Yeah. And it's like, actually, maybe engaging in something that you absolutely know is going to make you sad is going to develop those changes and the actual real treatment for depression that you're looking for.
Right. Sorry, that just hit me with something. That was good. I've had, and I hated it that I've had to do it, but I've gone to a couple clients' funerals.
Oh,
It was terrible. And when I left, I was really glad I went.
yeah.
And that was probably a little serotonin, but not. I wasn't obviously not happy about it.
Yeah, you weren't dopamined up.
No,
you weren't
I wasn't.
experiencing elated joy or anything.
No, I would. But it's one of those things. It's purposeful to me to show that they were important to me. Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
Well, that was really good. Yeah, I agree. So what should we get into here? I mean, do we?
I would say we're probably at a point now. Let's give people like what would a solution actually be?
I don't know. I think we're getting to. We're both. I think both proponents of behavioral activation, but we both see that model lacking, and that it doesn't talk about values or what you care about.
I think you can do that for so long, and then you're going to get tapped.
Yeah, and particularly like the motivation. I think the low motivation a lot of times comes from you don't know why you're doing it. I know you hate the question,
Yeah.
but if you know why, it does tend to help with. It doesn't like make it any worse. I go back to what Kelly Wilson said to us one time when we went. Kelly Wilson's a researcher in depression, anxiety, and does a lot of acceptance commitment therapy talk. And we were in a presentation one time, and he held up a pen and he asked, "Would you let me stab this pen through your hand?" And everybody in the audience, says, "No, that wouldn't hurt. Like hell, I'm not doing that." Then he said, "Well, if letting me stab this pen through your hand made it so that nobody in the world will ever get cancer again, would you let me stab this pen through your hand?" And I mean, everyone in the room says yes. Yes, most people say yes. And then he asked the question, would it hurt any less? And the answer, that's an interesting answer, is no, it wouldn't hurt any less. And so when you know why you're doing something, it doesn't actually make it less annoying, less painful, less hard. It just makes you more likely to be able to get through it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it is important to figure out what you care about. If we're going to give some just basics, I lean towards set a time to get up every morning and get up at that time.
Yeah.
And exercise 20 minutes a day. Get your heart rate up and check. Yeah, actually, now that I'm saying it, is whatever we talk about, I would actually say write it down and check it off when you've gotten it done.
I'd even back it up further than that. I kind of go back to our anxiety episode. I feel like the first step is like maybe accept the fact that happy is really not the goal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I hope that's kind of clear in what we're talking about today. Yeah.
But I do think, accepting the idea that you're probably going to go pursue things that are emotionally tumultuous.
Yes.
Rather than maybe even like solidifying, maybe.
Right. We need to commit to that we're going to do some hard things and we're not going to feel good while we do it.
Yeah.
I go back when I felt depressed after the knee injury thing. It occurred to me I couldn't help anybody. There was nothing I could do, and that was really hard for me. And so I had to talk to a lot of insurance people that time. So I would actually see if I could talk to their managers and tell the manager what a great job the other person was doing, because it was the only thing I could do to help anybody. At that point, because I couldn't walk. So it became, well, like how do I pass on some sort of positivity? And it was, I was committing to, I can't walk.
Now, I gotta be honest, dude, visiting you at that time was difficult.
Yeah, I imagine.
Like coming to see you, I'm like, all right, gotta go sit down with this. Like, this
just go to the funeral.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely, and of course, when well, I get major feedback for supporting a friend and being with a friend when they're in this darkness. It's like, yeah, you got to know those things. You got to know what it is you're going for. And I think sometimes people have good answers that are just not the answers, though. It's like, why lose weight? Well, you want to look better. Well, that's only going to go so far.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would hope that'd be for being alive for your children or something like that. It'd be more important than that. Losing weight brought, I think, an also basic thing that I like to get when I work with clients who are showing signs of depression is just getting them eating.
Yeah.
Either eating, I think with symptoms of depression can go either way. You can eat to feel good. And so then that's where we need to kind of limit things, or you just don't eat because you don't feel like it.
Yeah, we probably should have said this earlier on, but depression is one of those weird things where like some of the symptoms are totally opposite of each other. So you might be sleeping too much. You might be sleeping enough. You might eat too much. You might not be eating enough.
Right.
I mean, it's weird that way.
It is, exactly. And so that's why I think we normalize those things as much as we can. So eat at least 3 meals a day. Don't, eat a plate of food and then be done. Don't just keep eating. Sleep 8 hours a day, 8 hours at night too. I think at night is important too, if you can. because sleeping at night is much better for your circadian rhythm, and it is going to make your mood a lot better. Exercise every day if you can. Maybe.
So really, it's about like the starting of depression. We would love to talk about acceptance and all these like know what you're into and all those kinds of things, but really the beginning is just if you just start doing the fundamentals, just sleep, eat, go to work, get the things done that you need to get done, just the basic fundamentals.
Yep. That would, yes, take your life back.
Yeah.
Do more. Do more better. It's why we named it that. It's what it boils
We're
down.
really trying not to be cliche with it.
I know.
Absolutely. It's so applicable.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. We'll wrap it up. And I already alluded to it, but the next episode will probably piggyback off this quite a bit. So thanks for listening. See you next time. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. You can follow us on our Instagram at DMB Psychology for updates and to submit any comments or questions. You can also find us on our website, domorebetter.buzzsprout.com, where we have info on all episodes as well as our donations and merchandise links if you'd like to support the podcast. You can search for us on YouTube and all major podcast platforms under Do More Better.